Let's talk about what we're going to be building out today. That JavaScript stuff, we're going to do a little bit of it, but the bulk of what we're going to focus on for the rest of today is going to be HTML and CSS. Okay. JavaScript was that functionality piece. We're going to come back to it. We're going to make stuff very functional, but before we make things functional, we got to know how to put content on the page that the user can interact with. And so that is what we are going to be focusing on first, and then we'll tie JavaScript stuff back into it. And so let me show you what we're going to be building out. The way that our courses are broken down is we have units. Units have lessons. So if you just click start, it's going to take you right to the Web Foundations kind of syllabus, what we're talking through. There's a how to install all the tools, how to install everything that we're working with. I'm going to skip that for this live presentation because you guys can kind of watch that if you want to. If you need help with any environment setup stuff, more than happy to do that. Most people will need at least a little bit of assistance with some environment stuff. That's just best done in like a one-on-one. You have that. So I'm actually going to dive straight into unit 2, and I'm going to show you what we're going to be building out. I'll also click here. If you click on the course outline, it'll take you to kind of this page here. We're going to be inside the web development unit. Diving in is all the getting started stuff. And let's look at our very first website. The way that we generally run lessons is a lesson will have a lecture piece to it, and then it will also have a lab. Students are responsible for completing the lab. Instructors are responsible for completing the instruction, right? And so what I'm going to be building out is essentially a tribute site. Tribute site to Akira Toriyama. I don't know if I say his name right or not, but he was the guy that invented Dragon Ball and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. We're gonna build a little tribute site to him, show off his work, some of that type of stuff. I'll show you what this looks like here in just a second. The idea is based on what I teach you guys in lecture, you should be able to apply those concepts to something different, okay? And why? Why do we force students to do something different than what we, the instructors, code? Is generally because when it comes to learning, most people don't actually learn by just following along. We want you to listen to the lecture. We want you to take notes. We want you to kind of learn from what we teach. And then I want you to practice on something that has different requirements, because you're going to use all the exact same stuff, but your requirements are going to be a little bit different, which means you have to actually think and apply the concepts that you're learning. And it's not just a plain, rinse and repeat, okay? Because rinse and repeat is going to get you into a mode where you're not actually learning or retaining anything, which is not what we want. And so we're pretty strict on those types of things, okay? And then most of our labs, most of our lectures will have a live working demo. We'll have a link to our source code, and we'll have a link to what is called the Figma, which is the design spec. So generally speaking, when it comes to building out a web application or a website or anything that you're going to build, some designer somewhere specs it out first, right? And then it's your job as a software developer to turn that spec into an actual project, okay? So I'll show you what this kind of looks like here, okay, in a tool called Figma, okay? If you've never heard of Figma, pretty cool. It's really good for like layouts and things of that nature. And so it's kind of more like a Photoshop style thing where, designers, they can click, they can move stuff around super easily, pretty straightforward stuff, okay? So our job is we want to build a website for a tribute, okay? Now, I'll be honest, we probably won't be able to get through the entire thing before noon, but we're going to tackle some of the big sections here, and we're going to try our best to get as far down here as we can. And so this is what we want to pull off, okay? Now, if we kind of look at this, you'll see, okay, cool. We got a, name. It's centered in this like red box here. So how do we center an image? How do we put an image on the page? We want to put some text. We want to do some color stuff. We got like this background image. We got these cool cards here, and then we have this section here. Looks pretty cool. So this is a website. This is not a web application, okay? And there is a big difference. A web application is more kind of the style of like, if you think about like online banking, if you think about like Facebook, Instagram, you think about social media, you think about any of those types of, those are applications. This is just informational, okay? It's pretty, it might have a little bit of functionality to it, but this would be a website, okay? We're gonna start by building a website because it's a good way to start learning HTML and CSS. Could I build a website like this way faster by not hand coding it out in something like Wix or what are the other, like Squarespace or, WordPress or any of those things? Absolutely, I could. But the purpose of hand coding out a website like this is to learn HTML intimately, to learn CSS intimately, because when you get into the web application, okay, the things that you cannot build with WordPress, you cannot build with Squarespace, it requires actual like coding development process. You're going to need to still know how to put things on the page and how to make them look pretty. Okay, because if your application isn't pretty, nobody's going to use it. So we're going to hand code all this out. Okay, we're going to learn a lot about HTML. We're going to learn a lot about CSS. Okay, we're even going to tie a little bit of JavaScript into it. Okay, now when I say HTML, what am I talking about? When I say CSS, what am I talking about? Okay, in order to kind of demonstrate that, let me show you. Okay, we'll jump back over to here. This is a demo of a live website that actually works. So we've pre-built this thing. It's here. You guys go to this URL and anybody could browse to it. It's super cool. Okay. Now, I'm going to once again right-click and hit inspect, and I'm pull open my developer tools. And before I was in the console, okay. Now if I click on the Elements tab, and I got to zoom out just a little bit. Okay. Everything you see on this side of the page, or this side of the DevTools, this is HTML. Okay. What you see over here, this is CSS. Okay. CSS is what makes a website pretty. It's what controls the layout of things. Okay. HTML is all of the information that you're going to be presenting to the user. If I come in here, I open up the head and I find the style sheet and I delete it. Okay. This is what this website looks like without any CSS. Okay. You'll notice that image is no longer round. Okay. That image is square. It's definitely not in the center of the page. There's no red. There's no color anywhere, right? We just have plain old content. Okay. Also, look at the size of that image compared to this image, right? So CSS is what's controlling all of those things. HTML is just us putting the information into the document. And so we want to illustrate how to do all of these things. Okay. Super fast, super cool, easy way to like preview a website without any of the CSS. You just go delete the CSS line from the HTML. Let's actually start coding out this website. Let's start putting all this information together, and let's start doing that in an actual dev environment. Okay. In order to do this, I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code on my computer, which is one of the tools that we have you guys install. All right, cool. And now I have VS Code open and there's nothing inside of my project. The thing that I'm going to set up right now is essentially a place for me to start writing code and to start previewing what it looks like. Inside of VS Code, you probably won't have near all the extension things that I have here, but when you install VS Code, the one extension that we do also ask you to install is called Live Server. I think it's called Live Server, not Live Preview. I'll double check both of these. But if I click this install button right here on my extensions tab, okay, this is going to allow me to preview my website as I'm building my website, which is super nice. Okay, so that'll take just a second here to install. And while that thing is installing, I'm going to come back to here. This is the Files tab. Okay, and we are going to create our HTML file. Okay, now the HTML file, if we click on this little button right here, generally speaking, when we go to build a website, okay, the HTML file needs to be called by a very specific name. We're going to call this index.html. Okay, when you're talking about files, okay, this period right here, okay, for the Windows operating system and kind of how most like code editors work, what comes after the period is what's called the file extension. And if I change the file extension, it changes the language format that the computer is expecting that file to be in. So you'll look here, you'll see I have HTML. It puts this little icon right here. Okay, this is a fancy little thing that VS Code does. If I change this to CSS, it changes the logo over there. If I change this to JS, it's going to change it to JavaScript. Okay. If I put HTML, I'm going to get HTML, right? If I did like Go, I'm going to get Go. So language specific usually is, going to be determined by the file extension name. Okay. So we're going to call this HTML. And the reason why we call this index is because when it comes to actually sending your code live, right? You're going to put it on the website for other people to see. The web environment automatically will load an index file. It will not automatically load any other file. Now, that's a little bit of a lie because it'll also load like home and index, I think are the two that pretty much most servers are built to automatically host. Okay. But yeah, that's why we call this index.html. And so now I have a HTML file. Now, I am also going to disable Copilot for right now. Copilot is an AI assistant. Okay, it really helps speed you up. When you're very first learning how to code, I highly recommend keep it turned off. For students in our full stack course, we generally say, do not even turn AI on for the first like 3 to 5 weeks in the course, kind of depending. And it's because I want you to learn the actual concepts yourself and not just be spoon-fed all of the code, because if everything is spoon-fed to you, you're probably not going to know when it's bad. Okay. So there's a difference between learning the foundational things and, just needing to get something done very, very quickly. At some point, we will care about your speed as a software developer, but that is not today. Okay. So we're going to disable the AI assistant for today. That being said, we're still going to use a lot of shortcuts that exist inside of VS Code. And so I have this index.html. If I click into here and I type in an exclamation point and press tab, I'm using what is called a code snippet. And that code snippet is going to give me the basic skeletal structure of an HTML document. And so everything that you see here, it's like HTML standards, right? In order for the browser to do the thing that it needs to do, we need to have this basic format. Okay. So this is kind of like what I was talking about in the console window. Is this is just the stuff that has to be there. This is kind of like the plain old syntax, right? Now there's a lot going on here. Okay. And we'll take some time to explain HTML here in just a second, but we're not going to dive into the nitty gritty immediately of like, why is this doc type and why do I have an exclamation point here? And you know what? It doesn't really matter. That's not what I need you to focus on as you're learning the code. I need you to focus on being able to deliver something of value. Okay. And so there are certain little things where it's like, you can read about that later, but it's not going to help you be any better of a software developer, right? At least not immediately. So the first things we want to do is let's get functional, right? Let's get some stuff printed to the page. I think I want live preview instead of live server. Oh, go live. No, where is it? Is there a button somewhere? Right here. Okay. I'm gonna put this over here. I'm gonna put this over here. I'm gonna close this sidebar. What I type in over here should show up over here. Okay. I have this environment now, okay, where I should be able to kind of see what's going on. One other thing that we will probably end up doing is we will open up our developer tools, and I'm going to put these down at the bottom of my screen and potentially zoom out a little bit on these. Okay. And so I should be able to write code here. We should see the output over here. And if we have any problems, they should show up down here. Okay. So this little layout right here, guys, when I'm coding, this is actually usually spread across like a couple of monitors, right? But for a presentation, or if I have to code and I'm just on my laptop at an airport or something, like this would probably be the basic screen layout that I would work with. So let's do this. Let's type in hello. We'll save it, and we get the word hello prints out over here. Pretty cool stuff. If I type in an H1, this is bigger. Okay, you're going to see this is bigger. Okay. Now let's talk about a couple of basic things here in HTML. Okay. As we go to explain this, okay, what we want to do is we want to put information on the page that the user cares about. Okay, and we want to do it in a format that makes sense. And we want to structure our document in a way that when it comes to trying to style it, we can style it so we can target things with CSS. So grouping and structure when it comes to HTML is going to be very, very important. And what we are going to do is we are going to introduce the concept of tags and elements. And so when we are in HTML, instead of using the curly braces, or instead of using the square braces, or what were the other ones? The parentheses. Okay. According to HTML, those special characters, they're normal text. They don't mean anything. But the angle bracket, now we're talking HTML. The less than sign, the greater than sign, these are the special syntax for HTML that denote, hey, I want to do something that's specific to the language. Okay. And you'll see like here with this like basic skeletal structure, there's a lot of that already going on, right? I could technically get rid of all of it and I could just write the word hello. Okay. And here it's telling you, hey man, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. My browser automatically picked this up, but I confused my server because I got rid of that basic skeletal structure. So let's go ahead and put that back. We'll say hello, hit save. Cool. All right. So if you can, I'm going to tell you for right now, let's ignore some of this stuff. And what's nice about VS Code is I can actually just hit this little down arrow. I can collapse it. And what we want to focus on is code that we put inside the body. Code that you put inside the body of an HTML document is intended for the user to see. When you just write words like hello, we see that pops up here on the screen. And if I press enter a whole bunch of times and then I type in world, what I want to point out now is in my code, I have a whole bunch of line breaks here, but in my output, these two words are right next to each other. Okay. And so what gives? Why is it doing that? Well, the reason why it's doing that is because HTML by default is not a white space sensitive language. What does that mean? Well, that basically means when you press enter a whole bunch of times, this is for you, the developer, to look at. But what the browser is going to do is it's only ever going to respect at most one space. Okay. So even if you have tons of line breaks here, okay, your output is going to be the same. If I hit a bunch of spaces, my output's still going to be the same. Okay. And so if I wanted to note things like paragraphs and heading elements and all sorts of cool stuff, right? I have to know the HTML markup for doing that. Let's go ahead. Oops. Let's go ahead and do this. Stop. Okay. If I want to put a paragraph on the page, okay, I'm going to type in a P and I get this little box that pops up. This little box is called IntelliSense and it's contextual. So it basically says, hey, these are things that you have access to. Okay. P is short for paragraph. Okay. And I'm just going to press tab and that's going to give me the paragraph element. Okay. And the paragraph element, okay, is denoted by special HTML syntax where the angle bracket is going to open. And then we put in what is called the tag name. Okay. So this is the tag name. Okay. Now the word tag name is not a recognized tag name, okay, in HTML. So that doesn't really mean anything. But the P is intended to be a paragraph, okay? And what I should point out here is I then have a closing angle bracket, and then I have this space here, and then I have a whole bunch more special stuff here. And this special syntax with this angle bracket that opens, and then this slash basically tells us that this slash is going to be closing the tag name that was opened up here. Okay, so I have a paragraph, it opens here. Okay, I can write whatever I want to write inside of here. Something like that, right? And then my paragraph ends right here. So if I do something like this, okay, I get a single paragraph on the page. HTML does not care that I put the line break here and I tried to put, cool, huh, down below. My output is still all one line. Okay. And so if I truly want two paragraphs, I'm going to put in another P tag and I'm going to say, pretty neat. And now I'm going to get a new line in my output window. Okay. And so when it comes to HTML, there's a lot of different tag names that you're going to need to learn. Okay. A lot of these different tag names are going to have special rules associated with them. Okay. And so, again, when it comes to programming, you're like, oh my gosh, there's like 10 billion things I need to learn. Yeah, but once you learn a couple of them, everything kind of follows suit. So there's a lot of patterns within programming. And if you can learn the patterns, you can absolutely learn to be a software developer. Okay. Now, we have a p tag. Okay. We have a pretty cool paragraph. We have another paragraph. Okay. Let's say I want a heading. Okay. So think about your newspapers. And a standard newspaper, an H1 is like on the very front page, and it's the biggest default chunk of text. Right? So a heading 1. And in all honesty, like some of these concepts do come to us from like early typesetting stuff. So we're going to say, this is an H1. And I get big bold text. That's way bigger than the paragraphs. Okay. Now I can use CSS to make my paragraph font way bigger than my heading font. But out of the box, without any other styles, the document is going to say, okay, well, headings are bigger than paragraphs. And so let's do that. And maybe we also need to support a slightly smaller H2, right? Now, what's funny is these headings go all the way from H1 down to H6. Oop, I should call this a heading. Okay, and you'll see here, dang man, that's tiny little text, right? That H6 is actually smaller than my paragraph font. Okay, but it's still treated as a heading. Okay, and so we can use those things for all sorts of different purposes. Okay, what I want to build, right, is like I was showing you, is essentially this website here. Okay, and let's focus primarily on just this top section to start. So Akira Toriyama, let's make his name in H1. It's big, it's probably important. Okay. And then we'll put a little bit of text in here with some dots in between it, see if we can figure out how to put those dots in. Okay. And we'll focus on this image. And when I very first put all this together, it's going to look terrible. It's going to look like the website I showed you that I removed all the CSS from, right? This one. So we want to basically pull off what we see here. Okay. So let's do that. Okay. Let's put in H1. Let's do Akira Toriyama. Okay. Then we'll put in a paragraph and we'll say early career. We'll just use like an emoji for right now. Dot. Circle. Sweet. We'll use like that one. No, totally failed. Should have used the orange circle. Make it look like a Dragon Ball. Right? Yeah, look at that. Early career, Dragon Ball. I'm just going to copy this so I have it in my clipboard here. What do we got? Gallery and legacy. Okay, cool. So if we look here, we look at our website. We got Akira Toriyama, we got early career, we got all this spacing going on. Okay, we're getting started. Super cool. How do I put an image on the page? Okay, well, an image, I want it to be above Akira's name. Okay, so I'm going to use the image tag. Now, for some crazy reason in HTML, okay, what you don't ever want to do is you don't want to start with an angle bracket and then start typing in just a word. Okay, what I generally do, especially inside of VS Code, is you think about, okay, what do I want? Let me type in the very first character and let's see what's available. So if I type in I have a couple of options here. I have this IFR, I have iframe, I have image, I have images, I have all these different things. These are valid options for me to choose from. As a matter of fact, just the letter I is also a valid option as an element. So if I press tab, you're going to get I. And if I write something in here, cool stuff, that's italicized. The I tag means italics. Nowadays, we pretty much reserve the I tag for icons, which we'll show later, but that's one option, okay? If I type in IM, then I'm going to get image, okay? And what I specifically want to point out, if I type in A, like how you actually spell the word image, my little helper box goes away. And the second that helper box goes away, you should know, hey, if you're trying to do something like language specific, you've taken a wrong path. Full stop, it's no longer going to work for you. So if I hit backspace, my little helper box isn't there anymore. That's a bummer, right? If I want my helper box, if I want my little helper box to come back, I can hit Control Spacebar, okay? Or you can erase the line and start typing it again, okay? But if you ever hit Control Spacebar, you should be able to open this box, okay? If I type in that A and I hit, Control Spacebar and I get no suggestions, guys, it means I'm doing something wrong, right? I've gone down the wrong path. So let's go ahead and do IM and then just press tab, and automatically you're going to get some different looking stuff than what we've dealt with already. One, I pressed tab and there was no closing element that automatically got put in for me. So that's kind of weird. And look at this. That looks scary. I have more stuff inside of the angle brackets that are not the tag name. So what are those things? Those are attributes. So the user's not going to see these things show up on the page. So if I just save this, you see nothing actually shows up here. I don't see SRC over here. I don't see alt. I don't see any of those words. But if I write a word here, I'm going to see that word pop up. Okay. So if I'm writing things outside of the angle brackets, that's for the end user to see. If there's things that are inside of the angle brackets, these are attributes, and the attributes are going to help assist this tag do its job. And so when we talk about an image, it wants to know what's the source of the image. Where is that image? Where can I find it? Is it on your computer? Is it on some sort of website somewhere? Where can I link to that image? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on mix image here. I'm going to copy the image link and I'm going to go paste, I'm going to paste that URL in right there. And then when I save this, we should be able to look at our website and I get the same image over here, which is super cool, right? And if I wanted to, I could go find a picture of a cat. I could say a cat. And I should be able to right click, copy this image, and paste it. And now my website should have a picture of a cat instead. So that's called hot linking. There's some times where that's okay. There's other times where you need to download and have the image yourself. Okay, we're just going to hot link all of our images today because I'm pulling them from Mick. So let's go ahead and grab Akira instead of the cat. And we got Akira. And then below it, we got his name. And we got this little section here. Super cool. This alt tag, what the heck does the alt tag mean? This alt tag is if for some reason, let's say Mick takes this picture down and it's no longer at this source. So I'm going to put like a 1 here and we're going to illustrate that it's broken. Okay. Inside of the alt tag, I can put the text that I want to show up in case the image breaks. So this would be a picture of Akira. And now you see this little broken picture icon and the text there of what I want to show up if the image doesn't load for some sort of reason, which is pretty nice. Okay. It's also nice for screen readers because people that have like visual impairments, the alt text will be read aloud to them as the screen is reading. So it's like, oh, a picture of Akira Toriyama, right? That's nice, right? Now I know what was on this thing if that picture was like super blurry to me. That type of stuff, also very important when it comes to web development, right? We want to make sure that we're building things that are accessible to everybody. I have an image, I have some text, I have a P tag here, okay? So I have the starts, I have all of the content that I need to pull off this very first section, right? But it's not going to look like that unless I start bringing in some CSS. So let's talk about bringing in CSS and let's talk about an issue that I'm likely going to have right now. And that is all of this stuff is kind of like in its own section. And then this is kind of its own section. And I want to make sure that those two sections can be clearly defined. What I have right now with this current markup is if I just start going directly into these next things, well, I need another image and I need some more text. And somehow I've got to like distinguish that that is going to be almost in like this like card looking thing. And this is going to be a separate card. So how do you create boundaries within HTML? Well, what we are going to introduce is called the div tag. Okay. A div, AKA a box, a div stands for a division. So it's a division of the page, or it's a box, right? Just think of it as a box, right? And when you're building HTML, you want to think like, okay, I need a box and I'm going to put a whole bunch of stuff in this one box. So if you've ever worked at the Amazon warehouse, like, man, you got a leg up when it comes to software development. You know what to put where, right? So let's create a div and I'm going to press tab. And the div has this closing tag. And what I want to do is just like my curly braces in like JavaScript that I was showing earlier with my hero, when I was like, let hero equal. And then I put all of the things about the hero inside of the curly braces. Okay. HTML works very similarly. This is the opening tag, and this is where I want that tag to close. So this becomes a division of the page. What's good about that is I can target this very specific division and I can apply certain rules like maybe a red background, maybe a centered image, all sorts of things of that nature. And that's all going to come to me from CSS Land. Dang, we've got HTML. We're ready to start involving CSS. So how do we start writing CSS? Okay. Well, one of the things that I need to do is I need to create a new file. And when I create this brand new file, I'm going to open up my little file explorer. I'm going to click, let's go back to our page, right? Let's click this little plus button and let's create our style.css. Okay. And again, file names, those extensions, they really matter. This thing here is not going to automatically be picked up by any type of browser. We're going to have to specifically remember what we name our files because I'm going to have to link my HTML and my CSS together. So I'll show you how we do that here in just a second. So here's CSS. This is, again, just, plain empty file, nothing in here. It's not going to do anything until you start writing it. And now, if we start with an angle bracket, CSS is going to get mad at us. It's like, that's not valid. That's a bad character to CSS Land. So again, oh my goodness, I'm like, this syntax is killing me. The syntax is going to kill you guys for a little bit as you first get started. It's totally normal. It's one of those first hurdles for everybody to overcome. And inevitably, you're going to be like working on something and you're going to break syntax and your entire page is just going to like blow up. And you'll be like, what did I do? And you're going to stare at it for like 10 minutes and you're not going to be able to find it. And then you ask somebody else to look at it and they'll be like, oh, looks like you're missing a quote, right? Oh, it looks like you put an S in the wrong spot. Oh, it looks like you forgot an S. And you put it in and everything magically goes back to working, okay? That's not because you're bad or you're dumb or like this is beyond you, right? That is a simple typo and somebody with seasoned eyes will find it that fast and somebody who's brand new will spend hours staring at a screen and not be able to see it. And so that is, again, one of those things that I always tell students, never spend hours looking for an S when I can find it for you in like 1 second, right? It's not worth your time, okay? And it might not be an S, it might be a curly brace, it might be a quote mark, it might be one of those things, okay? Just ask for help, okay? Ask for help. One of the big things about having access to like the Discord channel is if you're coding, you're working on some of these projects, even on your own time, or you're in the lab, something's not working, just ask for help, okay? So, cool, CSS Land, okay? How are we going to tie CSS and HTML together? Well, inside of my HTML, inside of this section, I was like, I don't want to talk about it. Now I'm ready to talk about it, okay? I'm going to open up the head, and inside of the head, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the browser, hey, browser, would you mind linking that CSS file for me? Okay. Now, link also, it's an HTML tag, so it's going to have special syntax associated with it. I'm going to press tab, and once again, you'll see There's no closing element here, kind of like that image one. There are certain elements or there's certain tags inside of HTML that are self-contained. So that's why I always say like use your IntelliSense, use your little helper, because if I put in a forward slash and then I come in here and I'm like link, that's bad. And as a matter of fact, that's like automatically changing a whole bunch of other stuff for me, and I don't want it to do that. Okay. So that's a self-contained tag. The href is a lot like the image source, where it says, where am I going to find the file that I'm going to link? Hlink stands for hyperlink reference. So it's looking for a URL. My URL, though, can be relative to the website that I'm currently building. So if I'm in my index file, I should just be able to say style.css because those files are right next to each other. Okay. And the browser's smart enough to figure that out. So I'm going to say style.css, and I'm going to save it. Then I'm going to close that head back down. I'm not going to talk about it right now. The head is used for stuff that the end user's never really going to see, but it's all like the metadata. It's the stuff that probably needs to be there. You're going to link a whole bunch of files together. You're going to do a whole bunch of that type of stuff, but it's never really intended to be displayed to the user. With the one exception of, you notice how like on Mix website, we got this like cool like Dragon Ball and Dragon, and it says the word tribute here. And our website is lame and it just says document. That's the one like user visible thing that you're going to put in the head section of your website. Okay. And we're going to use the title tag for that, and I'll show you that later. Okay. I have this div. I have my CSS. Everything's kind of linked together. So that means if I start writing CSS, I should be able to see those styles apply over here. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, let's target the entire body. So I'm going to write body. So I write the word body, and then I put in curly braces. And just like my hero, those curly braces denote the rules that are going to start after this curly brace, and they're going to end at that curly brace. So what I put in here is the code that's going to run, or the code that's going to be essentially effective against the body. Now, why the heck did I write body? Well, because body is one of those HTML tags that I have access to. Okay. And the body is everything that the user is going to see on the entire page. And so what I can do over here inside of CSS land is I can target specific elements, and then I can apply rules to those elements. Okay. So if I look at my body and I'm like, okay, background color red, my entire background is going to change red. That's great. That's perfect. Except if we look at our example, we got a red section here, and then we have a different section here, and then we have a different section here. We're using that red. This one's black, right? This section is kind of like gray. And then this section has, another one of those background images. Okay. I don't know if I want the entire page to be red. Maybe I only want certain divisions to be red. Does that kind of make sense? Now, again, special syntax. This was very similar to like the hero that we saw, where we defined a key, and then we had a colon, and then we defined the value. But when we were in JavaScript land, we had to put quotes around the word red. Here, no, you're just going to use it, right? Again, syntax is going to kill you for a while, but you'll get over it. Okay? Now, what I don't want to do is I don't want to target the entire body, because that doesn't seem right. Okay. What I would like to be able to do is I want to target just the division. So I could come into here and I could say like, okay, let's change this from body to div, okay, which is great. Now you're going to see exactly what I wanted to show you. And that is this little white border that's right here and this white border that's down here. And if I come back into my HTML and I start putting in more information like a p tag, and I'm like, this is the next section. Okay, my next section is not red. Perfect, that's what I want. But I do want this red to go all the way to the edge and the top. So what's going on? Okay, why is it not? Well, that div that I put on the page, it doesn't automatically touch all of the edges. And that is because by default in the browser, if I can bring this up, if I hover over the body here, I'll kind of zoom this in so maybe it's a little easier to see. Okay. If I hover over the body, you're going to see a bunch of different colors show up on the web page. Okay. And those colors mean different things. Okay. If I scroll this little section down right here, you're going to see that the body has a margin of 8 pixels. This little diagram right here, this is what is known as the box model, and it's going to control how close things are like to each other, right? How much space things have in between each other. And so you're going to use a combination of margin and padding to basically say, I want to move content kind of around so things don't touch edges. Like this picture, notice we don't see any red right on the edge of this picture. And that's because, well, what happens is the div was painted red with background color. And then an image was placed directly over the top of it. And there's nothing that's moving that image away from the edge. So they basically are occupying the exact same space. And if you think about layers, with the browser, everything is painted in layers. And so layer 1, background image, right? Layer 2, the actual image, right? And the text and everything else that you're going to see. And there's actually ways for us to play with those layers. So we could be like, and on layer 9,999, like, let's put something up here, which would show up on top of the image because, the image is on layer 1, essentially. Does that kind of make sense? What I don't want is I don't want that like weird, gross 8 pixels of margin on the body, because that means nothing is going to be able to touch the edge. And I'm always going to have this white like frame around my entire box, and I don't want that. So I'm actually going to use CSS to disable one of the default rules of the body. And I'm going to say margin 0. And turns that margin off, and now my picture shows up right on the very corner. Okay, and my red goes edge to edge, and my new section down here is still white. So I'm like, yes, perfect. Exactly what I wanted. Okay. Now, let's take this div and let's center the text. So we're going to say text align center. And if you've ever used like Microsoft Word, which I'm sure all of you guys have used some version of Word, you know those little like 3 icons where like left align, center align, right align, justify align, right? Nobody uses justify because we don't know how it works, right? I have all those exact same options with my text here. You can hit Control Space Bar and I can say center align, end align, justify align, left align, right align, start. For us that read standard English format, we read left to right. So start on our screens is synonymous with left, and end is synonymous with left. But if you're in a different part of the world and you read from right to left, start is going to be on the right and end is going to be on the left. And that's the computer automatically solving that for you. So as a software developer, if you're like, I do always want this to be on the opposite side of the screen from your reading direction, you would want to use start and end instead of left and right. Okay, that's what that's for. But I don't care about that. I just want the center of the page, and the center of the page is always the center of the page. Now, what I also think would be nice is, like we see kind of in our design here, see this little space above this image? And you see this space below that text? And if we look at our website, it looks bad, right? It's bad. That's okay. Okay, little by little, section by section, you're going to start styling. You're going to start making stuff look cool. Background color, text align. If I don't want things touching the very edges, okay, you would think, oh, well, we talked about margin earlier. So what if we just do like margin in pixels, right? That seems weird, counting things in pixels. Duh! That's not correct, okay? And the reason why that's not correct is because margin moves everything away. It doesn't give you space inside. Padding gives you space inside. So think of padding like, I put my item in the box, right? So I put a dish, like china, my prized china, I put it in a box, okay? And I don't want anything to touch it inside that box. So I'm going to make sure that it has some margins before I put other stuff in, right? So I'm going to, put things in and nothing's going to touch my china. But if that box gets shaken, everything's going to fall on top of the china, and that's no good. So then I'm going to shove a whole bunch of packing peanuts in there, and the packing peanuts are going to take up the space in between, that empty space. And then when I put, my clock next to my china plate, the clock can't fall over because the packing peanuts aren't going to let it. The packing peanuts are your padding. Okay. And so if we change this from margin to padding, what we're now doing is we're creating that space inside the box that nothing is allowed to go into. Does that make sense? So we're filling up that area and we're giving ourselves a little bit more room. Okay. So padding can squeeze content in. Okay. It will grow the overall size of the box. Some of that type of stuff you have to be aware of, but this is much closer to what I actually want to pull off. I want to target this image, and I want this image to be round. I don't want it to be like square. So can I make the image round with just CSS, right? I don't have to go back to my designer and be like, hey, give me a round image. I can do it myself. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to target our image and we're going to say, let's make the border radius 50%. And what that's going to do is give me a circle. Okay. And you're like, how in the world would you have known to do that? I've been a developer for a long time and somebody told me at one point in time. And so I learned it, just like you guys have now learned it. Okay. Which is kind of funny because there's one of those things where it's like, but how would you know if you hadn't been told? I probably won it, right? I probably won it. But if I needed to learn something brand new that I didn't already know how to do, one, I'm going to ask, like probably ChatGPT these days, right? Or I'm going to ask my mentor or my instructor or whoever, right? Or I'm going to go to the documentation for how things work for a particular language. Okay, what's nice about the web and what's nice about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and smart about VS Code is if I just hover over this and you're like, I don't know what this thing does. How do I use it? You can hover over pretty much anything in VS Code and it's going to give you this little highlight box. And if I click on MDN reference, this is going to say, hey, can I open this website for you that's going to tell you how border radius works? Okay, I could come here and I could read all about how border radius works. Okay, and they have these little interactive demos. Dude, that is like in the process of it moving, I thought I saw like the Star Trek logo starting to form. I was like, dude, that's cool. No, they didn't do it. But anyways, they have these little interactive demos, which are super nice. And it's like, oh, cool. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with this. And if you really want to read about it, here you can read all of this like textbook style documentation on how things work. And it's for everything that the language supports, which is crazy cool. Super duper nice. Guys, I'll be honest with you though. There are tons of things that I have learned how to do because someone just told me at one point in time in my career, and I've had to do it enough that I eventually just kind of memorized it. And then there's other smaller things that I have had to come to the documentation and be like, how the heck does this thing work? And then if I've ever had to use it again, I have to go back to the documentation because I use it so infrequently that I've never bothered to memorize it. And that is to this day, there are things in CSS and HTML and in JavaScript and in every single language that I write in that I don't remember how to do. So I have to know where the documentation is. But chances are, if I don't remember how to do it just off the top of my head, it's probably because it's not a standard. And it's probably one of those things that everybody has to look up. And when you're very first starting as a student, what's hard is knowing the difference between those things. And so the majority of things that we're going to teach you in these courses are really designed at being like, these are the things that you're going to spend 90% of your time doing. And so these are the things to memorize, right? These are the things to just like be like, okay, that's how that one works. I'm going to commit that one to memory. Then I'm going to move forward with life. Just like my syntax. And if you're like, my memory is not that good, write stuff down and practice, and your memory will get better. And your memory is not going to be good for, weeks and weeks. And it's going to take hours and hours and hours of practice before you just know how to do something. It's like I don't remember how many hours. There's something like 500 hours to like excellence or something like that, where it's like you have to spend 500 hours doing a thing before it's like, I can just do the thing without having to think about it. Border radius. Cool. That's how you round out images. Okay. If I wanted to adjust this and be like, nah, man, 30%, not 50. Notice it's not a perfect circle. If my image wasn't perfectly square and I did 50%, it's going to give me an ellipse like an egg as well. So, border radius is not always like the end all be all to everything. I can actually illustrate this by, let's set the height. We'll do 100 pixels and then we'll set the width to like 400 pixels. Gross. That looks terrible. Okay. But I did this myself. Okay. I specifically changed the dimensions of the image and then tried to make it a circle, and it made it an egg, right? An egg turned on its side. Okay. If I adjust this to like, 600 by 400, there's my oval. There's my egg standing up. That's the type of stuff where it's like, okay, I mean, maybe I need to just say, let's make this like 250. Okay. And let's make this 250. And this gives me a pretty nicely rounded out image, right? So if my image isn't already square, sometimes I need to make it square. Sometimes when you go to make something square though, you're going to really skew the proportions. Okay. And so there's all sorts of like CSS things you can do to fix skewed proportions. Okay. We don't need to get into all of that, but it is cool that I can change the height and width of an image and I can make it look like a circle. Pretty fancy stuff. Okay. If I wanted him to have like a border, something like 4 pixels, solid white, now I can, drop that on there. Again, super cool stuff. Okay. But man, I'm already starting to write a lot of CSS. And once again, it's like, man, how would you know that all those things exist? Okay. The purpose of, class is to expose you to all of this, and you're not going to memorize all of it on day one. And so that's what code references are for, right? If you're like, oh, that's really cool. How did they pull that off? I want to be able to do something similar. Oftentimes I will just go look at the source code of how someone did a thing. Does that make sense? Okay, here's one more thing that I do want to do. I'm going to go back to my div and I want to change the color because in my example, this is kind of white. Oh, and this red is not like perfectly red. This red looks like, I think somewhere I have the actual like color code of this red right here. This is the color code. Okay. Obviously that's probably hard to see on the projector, but this is like a very, very specific red color. And then I think this is just plain white. Yep, that's just plain white. Okay. When it comes to dealing with colors, I can write just the name of the color, like red. And what's pretty funny is there are all sorts of like wild color names. So I hit Control Spacebar to bring this up, and you get like all of these like colors. And there's a lot that just have like names, like chartreuse. Other than like a demo, I don't think I've ever actually written the word chartreuse, right? Or pick that as like, that's the color I want. But companies, oftentimes they really have like very specific colors, and this is the wrong color red. So what I can do is I can drop in my actual color code, okay, in what is called hex format, okay? So this is hex format. This is the red color I want. What's also nice about VS Code is I could come here and be like, oh, I think it's actually more like this color. And then when I save that, I'm going to get, that's the actual color I'm using, right? Now, obviously, let's put it back to the one that was picked out, but that's that red color. And on the projector, they look the same. On my screen, they look almost, completely different, but I guess it's hard for the projector to tell. So the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color. And when I say color, it means text color, font color. So let's go ahead and say white. And if I don't want perfectly white, sometimes I'll use like white smoke, okay? Or I'll come in here and once again, do something like FFF. This is full red, full green, full blue. Okay, hexadecimal values are essentially in red, green, blue. And F basically means full color, full max. This is actually shorthand for FFF, like this. And 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 is no color, no red, no green, no blue. Okay. And what's funny is these two numbers correspond to red. These two numbers correspond to our G, green, right? And these two are blue. So I turned all that off. And when we count in hexadecimal format, we count from 0 to F for both of these values. So if I put in like F0, think of this as the 10 place. Think of this as the ones place for blue. Does that make sense? So this is like color value 10, right? Or 90. If you wanted to think in scales of like 100, this would be like 90. Whereas 1 would be like not quite 10, whatever that is. I don't know how many numbers I have there, but whatever. I'm not going to do the math, guys. I don't remember my 16ths. Yeah, that's what it is, right? 16. That's kind of the way that works. So this value could go all the way from 9 or F. That's still not going to change the color that much because this color needs to go up. If I change this to like C, right now I'm getting pretty blue. FFF, shorthand, if you only use 3 characters, it's going to repeat that one character for both in that value. Neat, fancy, cool stuff. Let's take a break.